You are now tuned into Then Radio. If you enjoy our videos, we ask that you consider joining our Patreon to support our channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you never miss a new video. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and as always, thank you for watching.
When I got the crisp $50 bill in advance, I figured my client had a heart of gold. But after I was beat up, double-crossed, and shot at, I realized just how hard a heart of gold can be.
From the pen of Raymond Chandler, outstanding author of crime fiction, comes his most famous character as CBS presents The Adventures of Philip Marlowe. And now, with Gerald Moore starred as Philip Marlowe, we bring you tonight's unusual story, The Heart of Gold.
I had spent the day trying to decide how to spend the day, and finally convinced myself Sunday afternoon was a good time to catch up with neglected bookkeeping. But I only got as far as the office door because a special delivery letter was stuck in the mail slot. I ripped it open and watched a crisp $50 bill flutter to the floor. Pinning it down with my toe, I turned to the letter, which was dated Saturday. Dear Mr. Marlowe, kindly investigate the party who lives at 1903 North Ogden Street to find out if his name is really Elliot Perdue and what his occupation is. Then please come to my residence at 5 tomorrow, Sunday. I live at the home of a friend, Arthur Stewart, 33 Lemonwood Drive in Bel Air. I sincerely hope that $50 will be a sufficient retainer. Truly yours, Helen Asher. Judging from the tone of her letter, it was obvious that Helen Asher didn't hire private detectives very often. Nevertheless, I glanced at my watch, which said I had to work very fast, and I headed for 1903 North Ogden. It turned out to be a small house near Selma Street. I got out of my car and walked up to the door. Good afternoon, sir. You the resident here?
That's right. What do you want?
I represent the Dr. Potter poll of public opinion. I'd like to ask you a few questions regarding...
Sorry, but I don't have any opinions to express.
Oh, even the opinions of a man with no opinions are important to us. Now, let's just let me step inside here, get out my notebook. There we are.
All right, but make it fast.
Right. Now, what is your occupation?
I'm an investment broker.
With which firm?
I'm independent.
I see. And what is your name, sir?
What do you need my name for?
Well, for my personal records in case I have to come back.
Elliot Perdue.
Uh-huh. Do you have any hobbies other than horse racing?
What do you mean?
Those dope sheets and racing forms there on your desk. I'm quite an admirer of horseflesh myself.
You're quite a character, too, aren't you? Working on Sunday and all?
Well, you know how public opinion is. It goes right on, rain, shine, or Sunday.
Excuse me a moment. Oh, by the way, what's your name?
Marlowe, Philip Marlowe.
Okay, Mr. Marlowe. Stand still, because I'm not kidding about this gun. I'll beat it back to whoever hired you and tell them they're being very clumsy about a very delicate situation. One more move like this, and they won't get another chance.
I knew Perdue meant business, so I left without an argument. Well, at least I had a repeat on the name, Elliot Perdue, and the occupation of bookie to toss at Helen Asher when I met her at 5 o'clock. In Bel Air, I eventually found 33 Lemonwood Drive. 200 yards of palm trees stood at rigid attention while I drove through the gate and up to the house. When the butler opened the door, he stared at me like my hat was on fire.
Yes, sir. Did you wish something?
Yes, I'd like to see Mrs. Asher, please.
Mrs. Asher? Oh, good heavens. Mr. Stewart.
What's the matter, Robert?
Why is it?
I'm Philip Marlowe, Mr. Stewart, a private detective. I have an appointment with Mrs. Asher. Is she at home?
Oh, Mr. Marlowe, perhaps you can help. I don't know what to do. It's such a terrible thing.
What's happened?
Upstairs, not 5 minutes ago, Mrs. Asher shot herself.
Shot herself?
Please, if you'd come up with me.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I'm certainly grateful for your help, Mr. Marlowe. Yeah, this is her room. She's in here. There.
Yeah, she's dead, all right. Shot herself in the left temple. Whose gun is that, Mr. Stewart?
Well, it's mine. I kept it in the desk downstairs.
Did you find her?
No, Roberts did. I was out in the hothouse working with my orchids. You see, I've been out of town. I just came in this morning on the super chief from Chicago, and I wasn't expected back until Wednesday.
Yeah, look, Mr. Stewart, do you mind telling me how well you knew Mrs. Asher?
Oh, very well indeed. Ever since the accident 3 years ago, she lived in my house under my care.
The accident?
Yes, that's how she got those scars on her cheek and neck. As you can see, my hands were burned at the same time.
Would you mind telling me about it?
Well, I was living in Canada at the time. One day, my wife Florence and I went to a camp near Quebec, and we met Helen Asher our first day there. She was a pathetic, lonely woman, a widow.
Oh?
That very night, while she was visiting us, the oil stove in our cabin exploded.
Oh.
Florence, my wife, was killed, and Mrs. Asher was severely burned. It was ghastly.
I can imagine.
Mrs. Asher had no one, so I thought the least I could do would be to care for her, since I knew the accident had been caused by sheer carelessness on my part.
You took over full responsibility for her?
Yes, I did everything I could think of, but she never quite got over the shock of that night, and now this. It's horrible.
Have you notified the police yet?
No,
You
no.
better do it right now.
Yes, I'll go right downstairs and call them.
The dead woman on the floor had been beautiful once. No doubt about it. This was my client's, and a certain $50 bill was burning a hole in my pocket. I wandered over to a writing table, and as I looked down, I noticed that the Sunday sheet had been torn off the memo pad. It bothered me. Tomorrow should mean nothing to a suicide, yet Mrs. Asher's memo pad showed Monday already. The sheet was blank, but on a hunch I tore it off and stuck it in my pocket. I was about to turn away when I saw a book of matches from the Conga Club. So I picked that up, too, and then I left. I drove around for some time trying to figure things out. Then I went down to police headquarters to see one Lieutenant Ibarra.
It's suicide as far as we're concerned, Marlowe. Everything checks. Mrs. Asher was despondent and she killed herself. She didn't leave a suicide letter, but they don't always. How'd you get in on this?
Well, she paid me $50 in advance to air out a small-time bookie or worse named Elliot Purdue. Incidentally, what's the background on Arthur Stewart?
Oh, he's a big-money fashion designer. Started his business on his wife's insurance. She died in an accident in Canada. He did a lot for Mrs. Asher because he felt responsible.
Yeah, I know all that. But was she left-handed? Did Stewart come in on the super chief this morning, and was it the butler that found the body?
That's right. We checked it all.
Ah.
Hey, look, Phil, do you have any good reason to think this isn't suicide?
No, not really. It's just that $50 in advance that bothers me, I guess. Oh, by the way, I've got a piece of paper I'd like the boys in the lab to run a test on, okay?
Sure, Casey will fix you up. Marlowe, I figure suicide now, but I can always change my mind.
I went down the hall to the police laboratory and handed the blank page of the memo pad to Casey. 10 minutes later, he explained that the impression showed a left-handed person had written a number, Bradshaw 711, with a wide point fountain pen, probably on the page just above the one I'd given him. Well, I thanked him, dropped 4 bits in the Christmas fund bottle, and found a phone. I dialed Bradshaw 711 and waited.
Hello?
Hello? Who's this?
The man in the moon. Come up and see me some other time.
Hey, wait a minute. I like your voice. And besides, 711 is a very lucky number.
3 passes in a row. But don't let it fool you, Jack. The answer is no dice. Goodbye.
Yes, well? I gathered she was in no mood for playing, so I decided to be strictly business and dialed again. There was no answer. I let it ring for some time, but Miss Golden's voice obviously wasn't taking any more anonymous calls. I'd left only the long shot, the book of matches I'd found on Mrs. Asher's desk. The Conga Club was on the Sunset Strip, so I drove out there, found a parking space on a side street nearby, and went in. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, so I paid $1.10 for a scotch and soda worth 40 cents, just to help pass the time. An amber spotlight was glistening down on a set of sequin contours that would have melted the ice age down to a fortnight. And she was singing.
For wherever my man is, I am his forever more.
knew it was Benita, the Conga's featured songstress, and I knew something else, too. There was no mistaking that voice. She was the girl with the lucky phone number. I wrote her a note, called a waiter to the table to deliver it, and then sat back to watch her as she glided over and sidled into a chair opposite me.
It was your penmanship that intrigued me, Mr. Malone.
It was your voice and so forth, mostly the so forth, that got me, Benita.
Would you care to decipher the Sanskrit you call a note? The waiter said you wrote it.
Sure. It says important business.
That's an idiom. If you wanted to talk turkey, how would you translate it?
Do you know a woman named Helen Asher?
Not that I remember. Why?
Well, your phone number showed up on a memo pad. How do you account for that?
How should I know? Maybe she intended to call me up. Look, you're quite a handsome man, Mr. Marlowe. But you look silly with your nose bent. Why do you keep sticking it into other people's business?
Because besides being paid for it, it sometimes leads to meeting interesting and beautiful people. Present company included.
What do you want?
Mrs. Asher killed herself tonight.
Mrs. Asher's dead?
Yeah. And considering you said you didn't know her, you look very put out about it.
All right, Marlowe, you win. But let's not talk about it here. Finish your drink while I get out of this costume. Then meet me outside by the front door in 10 minutes.
When she headed for the back of the club, I headed for the front. I got out the door and down to my car just in time to see her leave by the stage entrance. She jumped into a yellow convertible, ripped down Sunset Boulevard, turned onto Doheny, and scraped to a halt in front of the Regent Apartments. At the door, a tall, sunburned man popped up from somewhere and intercepted her. It was Elliot Perdue. A short but hot argument took place, and apparently Perdue won, because they went in together. I found the name Benita Malone over the mailbox in number 5 and got to her apartment door just as the second round started.
No, I haven't changed my mind, Elliot.
I've been doing a little research since you threw me over, Benita. I've got you and your precious plans right here in the palm of my hand.
What are you talking about?
This little heart-shaped locket on this little golden chain.
Let me see that.
No. I'm not showing this trinket until just the right moment.
Listen, Elliot, I don't know what's brewing in that slimy brain of yours. But get this, if you try to monkey with my life again, so help me, I'll kill you. Now, get out.
Benita, would you be interested if I told you that I know Mrs. Asher's secret?
And would you be interested if I told you that Mrs. Asher killed herself tonight? That slows you down, doesn't it, bright boy?
Yes, but it doesn't stop me, beautiful. I'll be seeing you before you know it.
I ducked into an alcove and heard Benita slam the door on Perdue's coattails as he left. So now I knew that Perdue, a locket, and Benita Malone added up some way to a bullet in the head for a scarred woman with a secret. I went back to my car and drove out to Stewart's house in Bel Air.
When you were here before, Marlowe, I was so upset I hardly realized you were a private detective. You had an appointment with Mrs. Asher. Had she hired you?
Yes, to investigate someone, but she didn't live long enough to give me the details.
Now, what sort of trouble could she have been in to have needed a private detective?
I don't know. But perhaps you can help me find out by answering a few questions.
Anything at all, Mr. Marlowe.
Does the name Elliot Perdue mean anything to you, Mr. Stewart?
Elliot Perdue? No, I'm afraid not.
How about Benita Malone?
Yeah, I've never heard of her.
You know anything about a heart-shaped locket on a gold chain?
A locket? A gold locket?
Yeah.
Mrs. Asher had a heart-shaped gold locket.
Where'd she keep it?
Well, upstairs in her jewelry box, I should imagine.
Come on, let's have a look, huh?
Yes. Right up these stairs here. This is her room, Marlowe.
I know. I was here once before.
Why? It's not here. It's not on her dressing table. Her jewelry box, it's gone, Marlowe. But you think that...
Elliot Perdue has it.
I can't understand this.
What's the locket like? What's inside it?
Just a picture. It was valued by Mrs. Asher because it was the only one she kept of herself the way she looked before the accident. Now, why would anyone else want that?
I don't know. But when we get that locket, we'll get a lot of answers along with it. Now I was more convinced than ever that Elliot Perdue, Benita, and the late Mrs. Asher's secret were all dangling from the same chain that supported the gold locket. I said goodnight to Arthur Stewart and started back for Hollywood. But a moment later, I changed my mind and abruptly swung onto a shadowed side road and parked, lights out. It had suddenly occurred to me that the gallivanting Mr. Perdue might call on Stewart. And if so, I wanted to be on hand. Well, 40 minutes later, I was about to call off the cloak and dagger routine when I heard the sound of a powerful motor roaring out of Stewart's driveway. I looked up just in time to see a long, black Nash whip by with Stewart at the wheel. From the speed of the car, I was certain he wasn't going out for the morning papers. Decided to go back to the house and question the butler while I could have him to myself.
Oh, why, no, Mr. Marlowe. I haven't any idea where Mr. Stewart went. I only know that he had a telephone call, after which he dashed out of the house highly upset.
Well, maybe some sick friend needed sitting up with, huh? But tell me, Roberts, did you ever hear of a man named Elliot Perdue?
Oh, yes, sir. He called on Mrs. Asher here once or twice while Mr. Stewart was away on business.
When did you last see this Mr. Perdue, Roberts?
Yesterday morning, sir, about 10 o'clock.
And one thing more, did you ever see Mrs. Asher wearing a gold locket, a heart-shaped one?
Oh, quite often, sir. As a matter of fact, she asked me about it just yesterday morning, shortly after Mr. Perdue left. She couldn't locate it anyplace.
A singular coincidence, huh? Oh, by the way, what do you know about a singer named Benita?
Benita? I've never heard of her, sir.
Are you sure she's never been out here as Mr. Stewart's guest?
Why, I'm positive, sir. Mr. Stewart never has any ladies out here, of any kind.
Oh? Doesn't that strike you as being strange, Roberts? After all, Mr. Stewart's a very eligible widower.
Widower, yes, Mr. Marlowe, but philanderer, no. Good night, sir.
As I drove back to Hollywood, I tried to figure out where Arthur Stewart had gone. But I had about as much to work with as Gypsy Rose Lee after a third encore. And after discounting Benita's place in the Conga, there was only Elliot Perdue's house on North Ogden. 15 minutes later, I walked up to it, but the place was as dark and as quiet as the inside of a coffin. I was about to turn back to my car when suddenly I caught the reflection of a sliver of light bouncing off the glass in Mr. Perdue's living room. I found the back door lock easy to bluff. A moment later, I stepped into the living room.
Marlowe, how did you know I was here?
Mr. Stewart told me.
You're a liar. Arthur wouldn't...
Arthur?
Well, you see, Mr. Stewart and I...
Oh, no, it's Mr. Stewart, huh? Wait a minute, there's someone outside.
Perdue.
Put out your light. Now, when he finds you, keep talking, say anything. I'll be behind the door. Here he is.
Well, Benita. What a waste of time, my dear. While you've been here rearranging my socks, I've been talking to your boyfriend with the locket safely tucked away right here in my breast pocket.
How clever of you. How absolutely ingenious.
It's a bit late for nasty words between us, Benita, because possession of you was part of the bargain I struck with Mr. Stewart. You see, What are you staring at?
My big blue eyes, Perdue. Don't move or I'll blast you.
You'll do nothing. No.
Get the gun, Benita. Now, Perdue, we'll play some more. Now the gentleman's breast pocket. Ah, here it is, Benita. Safe and sound.
Which is just the way I want it, Phil.
What? My own gun. Why, you beautiful
The locket,
snake.
Marlowe. Come on, I get nervous with one of these things in my hands. Throw it here. Thank you. Now, when I leave, Phil, don't come after me, because I'd hate to fill you full of little holes. Good night, dear.
When Benita stepped out of that house, I solemnly swore I wouldn't trust another woman for the next 100 years. But a groan from the body on the floor brought me back to 1948 and Elliot Perdue. I knew that he had seen the picture in the locket, so I went to work on him. Come on, Perdue, snap out of it. Come on.
Huh? Oh, it's you, Marlowe.
Who'd you expect, St. Peter? What was in the locket, Perdue?
I don't remember.
Maybe a call on Lieutenant Ibarra will refresh your memory.
I doubt it.
Then we better start playing games again. We'll start with one called Slap, Slap, Perdue.
No, let me alone, Marlowe. Get your hands off me.
You ready to start singing, huh? All we need now is the right lyrics.
No.
Come on, Perdue, talk.
Stop it, I'll talk.
Good. Now, why did Mrs. Asher kill herself?
Because she had a good reason.
Like what?
No, it's a long story.
Make it short.
Okay, Marlowe. Here goes.
Lieutenant Ibarra speaking.
Marlowe Ibarra. There's a 5-minute-old corpse lying in his living room at 1903 North Ogden. Name is Elliot Purdue. 3 shots through a closed window. I was lucky.
Any description of the killer?
No, none. Now, look, Ibarra, right now I'm going after a songbird named Benita Malone at the Regent Apartments on Doheny. Will you cover me there without sirens?
Sure, Marlowe. I'll attend to it in person.
It was only a healthy centerfielder's peg from Perdue's house to Benita's. When I got there, the place was dark and a car wasn't in sight. I decided to try the Conga Club. But as soon as I walked in, I began to worry because if Benita had wanted to get rid of that locket, she'd have had enough time to bury it at Forest Lawn. But I didn't know Benita, because Miss Oomph herself was singing in the amber spotlight, and dangling from her soft white neck was the heart-shaped gold locket.
I love him because he's wonderful, because he's just my bear.
When she caught my eye, she smiled like a maitre d', and the moment she was through with her song, she headed back in my direction. But before she got to me, I saw her give the high sign to an ape in a tuxedo. He looked at her and then across toward my table and left the room. I watched Benita glide across the floor in my direction. She was distinctly a thing of beauty.
Well, Phil, what do you think of my singing?
Oh, I'm just crazy about it. That and your jewelry. Especially that locket, family heirloom.
Mm-hmm. It was more or less handed down to me, generation to generation. That's an old Spanish custom.
Yeah, so I've been told. And I imagine tradition prohibits your parting with it, huh?
That's right. Unless, of course, someone with oodles of money offers me lots of it in exchange. Then naturally I'd be obliged to part with it.
I don't think you'd feel obliged to your mother on the second Sunday in May. Besides, I don't have oodles of money.
Oh, you should have told me that earlier. Goodbye, good looking.
Hey, wait a minute.
We couldn't do any business in a minute. And don't follow me if you want to stay pretty.
She pivoted on a spike heel and took off for a dressing room, and I knew that if I followed, I was scheduled for a nasty tete-a-tete with an ape in a tuxedo. When I made the lower floor and saw that the long corridor to a room was empty, I knew the setup. The ape would be on the other side of the door waiting. Benita still had my gun, so I got the nearest substitute for a blackjack, a full bottle of Paul Masson champagne. Then I walked noisily down the corridor as far as her door and knocked. Turned the knob slowly, kicked the door open, and stood clear. It worked. The ape's hairy hand was wrapped around my gun, and it came down in an arc that was never interrupted. And that left him off balance. The ape hit the floor, and before Benita had a chance to close her mouth, I ripped the locket from her neck, picked my gun up, and ran. I didn't stop until I collapsed against the store window. Then I opened up the locket. 2 minutes ran out on me before I realized what was wrong with the picture. Then I knew. Arthur Stewart's home in Bel Air was my next stop. 30 minutes later, I pulled up away from the place and parked. And keeping in the shadows, I approached the house where only the library and an upstairs bedroom showed any light. The library had French windows. When I moved up close, I was startled by the sight of a figure going through Stewart's desk. I stepped into the room and found it was my little friend, Benita. I've got my own gun again, Benita.
Phil.
Oh, doing a little dusting, honey?
Oh, don't be funny.
I'm not trying to. How is it you're not upstairs helping Stewart pack?
Because I've already finished packing, Mr. Marlowe, and don't turn around. That was well done, Benita.
Oh, fine. Sucked in by a little decoy sprinkled with sequins.
Never mind the pose, Marlowe. Just toss your gun on the couch over there. Now. That's better. You know, Marlowe, I can't say that I'm very sorry for you.
I don't expect condolences from a character who murdered a woman this afternoon and a man this evening.
You killed Mrs. Asher?
Yes, and that blackmailing scum Purdue as well. But both murders were very necessary, Benita. Even as Marlowe's here will be. Come over here, Benita, behind me.
Hurry, Arthur, let's get out of here.
Don't worry. And now, Mr. Marlowe, it's time for you.
Well, thanks, Benita. You swing a beautiful bookend. You know, I had you figured all wrong.
No, don't mention it, dear. I heard the cops coming anyway.
You sweet child. We're in here, Ibarra, all of us.
Oh, I figured you'd be out here when you didn't show up at that Songbird's place. Well, what's this?
The little man on the floor with a large bump on his head is Arthur Stewart, the man who killed Elliot Perdue to keep him from telling me the truth about Mrs. Asher, and the man who killed her this afternoon.
So Mrs. Asher didn't commit suicide after all.
No, but she wasn't murdered either. She died in that accident in Canada 3 years ago.
What are you talking about?
Well, the woman that Stewart killed here this afternoon wasn't Mrs. Asher. It was his wife, Mrs. Florence Stewart. You see, there must have been a mix-up in identifying the bodies of the two women at the time of the accident.
Mm-hmm.
Stewart and his wife had Mrs. Asher buried as Mrs. Stewart. Then they collected the insurance. Neat, huh?
Yeah. But what happened?
Yeah, it's simple. Stewart got bored with his scarred and unattractive wife, and he started running around with choice little numbers. Like Benita here.
Phil, honest, I didn't know a thing about this. Stewart told me that Mrs. Asher depended on him so heavily that she'd be crushed at his seeing another woman. But I didn't know she was his wife.
Marlowe, how do you figure this all out? From a locket that belonged to the woman we knew as Mrs. Asher. It had a picture of Stewart and Mrs. Asher taken in dress clothes before she was scarred. Yet Stewart claimed that he and his wife had only met Mrs. Asher the day of the accident, and on a camping trip at that.
But, Phil, I saw the picture, too, and I didn't figure that out.
That's because you were too busy trying to figure just how much the locket was worth to Arthur Stewart, or to anybody, in cold cash. You were blinded by all the dollar signs in front of your eyes, baby.
Why, Phil, how can you say such things?
Now, Marlowe, just so I don't toss and turn all night, tell me just why you were hired in the first place.
Well, Ibarra, it goes something like this. When Perdue knew that he was losing Benita to Stewart, he decided to check up on the opposition. And he not only found out what he wanted to know, but he found out a lot of things, too, that he didn't want to know. Mrs. Stewart, the late Mrs. Asher, became suspicious of his questioning, and incidentally of her husband. So she sent for me.
Well, Marlowe, Stewart certainly had me fooled. I doped him out to be a very generous guy, a great benefactor who was doing the right thing for a lonely, unfortunate woman.
Yeah, looked like he had a heart of gold, all right. But a funny thing, Ibarra, in the end, it was this heart of gold, this locket here, that got him. Mind if I keep it?
Not at all. You had a tough enough time getting hold of it. Good night, Phil.
Well, by the time I got back to my apartment on Franklin, the sky was beginning to fill with the soft gray of morning. I pulled the blinds down in my bedroom and sat down for a last cigarette. I'd mixed with a lot of funny people that day. But for some cockeyed reason, I kept thinking of Benita Malone, a girl who was no better than she had to be. Finally, I put her out of my mind, and I was about to turn off the desk lamp when I noticed my memo pad. Still that Sunday, which was understandable. But scrawled across the top sheet was a telephone number. And I couldn't figure how it got there. It was written in crimson lipstick. Bradshaw 7. 7-Eleven.
The Adventures of Philip Marlowe, created by Raymond Chandler, stars Gerald Moore and is produced and directed by Norman MacDonald. Featured in tonight's cast were Gloria Blondell, John Daner, Jack Moyles, and Ben Wright. Detective Lieutenant Ibarra was played by Jeff Corey. The special music was conceived and conducted by Richard Orant. Be sure to be with us again next week when Philip Marlowe says...
They were all after it. An importer, a beautiful woman, a nut, and a guy I couldn't figure out. But before we were through, one was in the hospital, two were in the morgue, and the fourth was waiting for the hangman. All that because of a blue burgonet, something I'd never even heard of before.
Dr. Fabian, the ship's doctor in cabin B-13, tells a new story of danger in far ports tonight over most of the CBS network stations. Tonight's story, The Island of Coffins, is another original drama by John Dixon Carr, famed mystery writer. You can hear it when the ship's whistles sound outside cabin B-13. This is Roy Rowan speaking. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
When I started, I thought one man was in trouble and 3 were trying to help him. But after I found 2 pounds of tobacco, 2 pieces of brass, and a boat without a pilot heading straight out to sea, I knew they had all been in trouble, and all had taken the hard way out.
From the pen of Raymond Chandler, outstanding author of crime fiction, comes his most famous character as CBS presents The Adventures of Philip Marlowe. And now, with Gerald Moore, starred as Philip Marlowe, we bring you tonight's exciting story, The Hard Way Out.
I had killed a shank of the afternoon in a Hollywood department store, trying for the 5th consecutive year to select something unique in a personalized Christmas card. A bright-eyed salesgirl finally suggested in desperation a smoking 38, spelling out Noel in delicate wisps of white curling smoke. Well, I gave up, settled for a reissue of last year's unoriginal message. An hour later, I was driving out toward Sepulveda and my new client, August Quigg, and I was glad to be away from the pre-holiday crowds and back to work. When I pulled up in front of the factory building, an immodest sign told me the man I was to meet inside was president and co-founder of Quigg & Slater, manufacturers of nothing but the best in construction materials.
Come in. Be with you in a minute. I'm on the phone. Listen, August Quigg does not change his policy overnight, Slater. Not after 25 years. You should know that, you of all people. Never mind the excuses, Slater. Those you always have, and they make me sick.
Partnership trouble, Mr. Quigg?
Oh, no, my partner is dead now 10 years. That was his son, Keith Slater. But he has nothing to say here. His father left it that way. Well, sit down, Mr. Marlowe, please. Slater is not what I want to talk to you about.
All right, Mr. Quigg, who is the man and what's his problem?
My general manager, Frank Emery.
No?
He has embezzled $60,000 of this company's money in the last year.
Then isn't this a great time for you to climb the nearest rooftop and scream copper?
No, because I want to save Frank Emery, not condemn him.
Why? What's so special about a general manager who keeps dipping itchy fingers into the till?
Mr. Marlowe, Frank Emery has worked for me for 7 years. And in that time, he has climbed from shop worker to plant foreman to general manager. And that is something which took me 15 years.
Which proves what?
That Frank can one day go right to the top. Here to my job. The honest way. And that is just the path he was on until a year ago when he got married.
Oh. Then he started to fill his pockets with company lettuce before he'd even gotten rid of the rice. Is that it?
Yes, but don't leap to any conclusions, Mr. Marlowe. Because his wife, Sheila, is a very sweet woman. Everybody knows that. And if anything, she should be a good influence.
Mr. Quigg, what's Frank Emery's salary?
$175 a week.
Oh. When'd you last see him?
This afternoon, about 2 o'clock. I called him in here. But I didn't say anything about the shortage. We just talked. I asked him if he thought he needed a vacation. He only sulked. He said he'd be all right in a little while. Then he left. But when he got back to his desk, he only stopped there long enough to pick up his hat. That was 3 hours ago.
You've called his house since?
Twice, but I got no answer. Here's the number, Marlowe, and the address. Now we better stop talking, start moving. I must know what Frank Emery plans to do. Yeah, this is my private number. The plant will close in half an hour, but I'll be here working late.
Okay. But before I get going, Mr. Quigg, one more question. Just so all this will make some sense to me. Were you ever in a jam like this yourself? A long time ago, maybe? And you know what it's like to be in Emery's shoes?
You're a pretty alert fellow, Mr. Marlowe. I do seem to remember a rich man who once kept me out of a lot of trouble. But the details aren't very clear anymore, so good night and good luck.
Hello?
Mr. Frank Emery, please.
I'm sorry, he's not in. Is this Philip Marlowe?
Yeah, that's right. That should make you Sheila Emery, huh?
Yes, I just finished speaking to August Quigg at the plant, Mr. Marlowe. He told me about you. And about Frank.
Take it easy, Mrs. Emery. Crying isn't going to help Frank any.
Yes, I know. But how can I help Frank? What can I do?
I'm not sure, but look, can you meet me right away? I'm at the Golden Crown. It's a cocktail lounge on Santa Monica Boulevard near Bradley.
Yes, of course, Mr. Marlowe. I'll be there as soon as possible.
Exactly 34 minutes later, a two-tone, sleek convertible about the size of a Pullman car glided to a stop in front of the Golden Crown. The loveliness behind the wheel was wearing a $100 hand-knit dress that just wouldn't let go. I knew it couldn't be Sheila Emery, but it was. She was a tall, luscious blonde with blue-gray eyes that were set wide apart and a face that any angel would have gladly traded his wings for. Now, 5 minutes later, we were seated inside at a quiet corner booth.
But only 2 weeks ago, everything was perfect, Mr. Marlowe. Frank didn't seem to have a care in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden, he changed. He became quiet, almost morose.
You never suspected that he was stealing from Quigg?
Of course not. And I still think there's some explanation, something we don't know about.
Maybe. But from where I sit, it looks like you two have been keeping up with the Vanderbilts instead of the Joneses. It always danced the bank account.
Just what do you mean by that, Mr. Marlowe?
Exhibit A, that knit 1 pearl 2 number you're wearing.
What?
Exhibit B, that splash of automobile you drove up in.
But Frank said we could afford those things. I know because I was worried when we bought the boat.
Yeah, what boat?
The Carefree. It's a 30-foot sailboat. We dock it near our cottage just beyond Santa Monica.
Hey, wait a minute. A sailboat, a cottage at the beach, that car? Just how far do you think $175 will stretch these days?
What do you mean? Frank makes twice that, plus bonuses.
Not unless he has a very fancy paper route on the side. Because 175, period, is the figure that Quigg quoted to me an hour ago.
Oh, no. No, I can't believe that. Frank wouldn't lie to me that way.
Yeah, some guys do funny things when they're too much in love. Oh, now, look, tears take time, honey. How about holding him back long enough to give me some dope that'll put me on Frank's trail, huh? I mean, names and numbers, his clubs, his friends, anything that'll give me a line.
Yes, of course. But all that information is in his address book at home.
All right. Home's our next stop. Just between us, Sheila. What are the chances that Frank has an extracurricular interest on a back street somewhere?
Another woman? Oh, no, I'm sure that's not the way things are. Frank loves me very much.
Yeah, I guess so. Believe me, if he doesn't, we're not looking for an embezzler. We're after a maniac. Come on, let's get out of here. When we left the Golden Crown, Sheila was still crying and in no shape to drive. So after parking my coupe in a nearby lot, we floated out to the Emery place in Brentwood in a two-tone Nash, which did everything at the push of a button except dry a girl's tears. At her house, Sheila pulled herself together long enough to give me a handful of addresses that might possibly lead to Frank Emery. But just as I was about to leave, I noticed a single phone number scribbled in pencil on the edge of a desk blotter. It was Crenshaw 22131. And since Sheila couldn't explain it, I wrote it down on a slip of paper and filed it in my pocket and left. But once outside, I remembered that my car was still on Santa Monica Boulevard at the Golden Crown. So I started back to the house to call a cab. I stopped suddenly at the sound of somebody in the shadows alongside the house. When I moved toward the noise, a man darted out between two trees, and I went after him.
Get your hands off.
Why? So we can play another round of hide and seek? No dice, brother. I'm getting too old for it. Now, who are you? What are you doing around the Emery place? Come on, let's have it.
Say, wait a minute, aren't you Marlowe? The man August Quigg hired?
That's right. You still haven't answered my question.
Oh, no, but I will now that I know who you are.
I'm Keith Slater. Surely dear Quig must have told you of me, the wastrel son of his late partner.
He did, but you're still parrying, Slater. Why were you hiding behind those trees?
Correction, Marlowe. I wasn't hiding. I was waiting for Frank Emery.
All right, we won't argue terms. Why were you waiting?
Because I wanted to get hold of Emery and help him before he goes too far. You see, Marlowe, he came back to the office after you left.
What? Did he talk to Quig?
No, the place had just closed and the old man was out for dinner.
Did you talk to Emery?
Yes, and it wasn't much fun. That poor fella's just about out of his mind, Marlowe. Well, he raved on for an hour and a half about how unfair Quig was. Said he knew that I was the one who'd get to run Quig and Slater after the old man died.
I don't follow that. When did you become the fair-haired boy around there?
Oh, I'm hardly that. But I do own a quarter of the plant, unless, of course, Quig fires me one day. Those are the terms of my father's will.
But Quig won't fire you, is that it?
He wouldn't think of it. After all, that would keep my dear father from resting easy in his grave.
Okay, let's skip it. Exactly what did Frank Emery tell you, Slater?
He said that August Quig was a two-faced liar and that he'd settle with him in his own way. I told Quig that when he got back from dinner. And I also reminded him that Frank had a key to the office.
That didn't faze Quig, did it?
No, he said he never worries twice. If Emery walked in on him, he'd think about what to do about it then. I tell you, Marlowe, we've got to get hold of Frank Emery and stop him before it's too late.
In just a moment, back to the adventures of Philip Marlowe. But first, just 1 hour from now, over most of these same CBS network stations, Eve Arden will be midway through her regular Sunday night role of Our Miss Brooks, America's most charming and most highly unusual school teacher. You've seen Eve Arden make her hilarious way through many a Hollywood movie. Now you can hear her every Sunday night as Our Miss Brooks, just a little later over most of these same CBS network stations. And now, with our star, Gerald Moore, we return to the second act of The Adventures of Philip Marlowe and tonight's story, The Hard Way Out.
It was nearly an hour later before I was back in my office on Cahuenga with my finger in the dial of the telephone, checking the names and places that Sheila Emery had given me. 2 nightclubs, 3 hotels, and 5 friends later, I'd run through the list without a single kosher lead. Sitting there thinking of all the places a guy could disappear to, I reached into my pocket for a lifesaver and found something else. The slip of paper that read Crenshaw 22131. The number I'd seen on the desk blotter at Emery's place. So, with nothing more to lose than another millimeter off the tip of my index finger, I went back to dialing.
Pipe and tobacco shop, Sam Newton talking.
Newton's what?
Pipe and tobacco shop, what can I do for you?
Not a thing, old-timer. My mistake. Pipe and tobacco shop. Marlowe speaking.
This is Sheila Emery, Marlowe. I think I know where Frank is.
You do?
Yes, at our cottage at the beach. It's closed up, but I was just going through some things in my desk when I discovered that the keys to the place were gone. And I clearly remember seeing them only yesterday.
What's the exact location of that cottage?
It's 2 miles north of Santa Monica and down on the beach, directly behind a large white frame house on the Pacific Coast Highway. Number 1221. You can't miss it.
1221. Okay, I'm leaving right now, and I'll call you as soon as I can, so try not to worry. Somehow or other, I made it straight out along Sunset to the beach and then north as far as the large white frame house without being tagged for low flying by any of the boys in blue. But when I got down to the cottage on the beach, I found it deserted and boarded up like opening night at an unlicensed peep show in Boston. Except for a couple of stray gulls who probably had insomnia, I was all alone. But the gregarious streak in me didn't suffer very long, because a minute later I had an unannounced visitor. It was a nasty caliber .45 automatic. And the man on the other end who gripped the handle like he knew what he was doing was none other than the general manager of Quig & Slater, Mr. Frank Emery.
Mind telling me who you are and what you want here?
Well, the name, which probably doesn't matter, Mr. Emery, is Philip Marlowe. But my business with you is something else. I'm working for your boss, August Quig, and believe it or not, he wants to help you.
That's a lie, Marlowe. Nobody wants to help me, and you know that. This is a smart trick, but it won't work. It can't work. And I'll tell you why. When the police do get to me, Marlowe, they won't find anything but a corpse. Is that clear?
Suicide. Don't be a fool. What about your wife?
Marlowe, that's why I took the $60,000. So say your breath. And unless you're interested in joining me, do exactly as I say. Now, here. Pick up these keys and open that door. Go on. Now, throw the keys back gently.
Please, Emery, listen to me.
No. I've listened to too many people already. Now it's my turn to talk. But all I'm going to say is goodbye in my own way.
You don't know what you're doing, Emery. Stop a minute. Think.
This isn't the time to think, Marlowe. This is the time to act. Now, get in.
Emery backed me into the cottage, stepped outside, and pulled the door shut. I waited a moment until I heard his car start. Then I tried the door and knew I was wasting my time. Emery had run a piece of pipe through the handle, and Gargantua himself couldn't have opened it from the inside. It took me 10 minutes to kick enough boards off one of the windows to wiggle out, and another 5 to get to a phone. When I told Sheila that her husband was on her way home in a very desperate frame of mind, she promised to hold him at all costs until I could get there. 20 minutes later, I was in Sheila's house on Bundy Drive.
Marlowe, what happened?
Where's your husband?
I don't know. He hasn't been here.
Oh, fine.
After you called me, I waited, but he didn't come back. Marlowe, what did you mean when you said Frank was desperate?
I'm afraid Frank intends to kill himself.
Kill himself? Oh, no, he can't.
Now, we still may be able to stop him. When he left the beach house, he was heading someplace to say goodbye. I figured for sure that meant you, but wherever he was going, he didn't want to be followed. He locked me in and... The gun. Holy smoke, where's your phone?
Right over there.
Oh.
Well, what about a gun? Does Frank have one?
Yeah, 45. Didn't come here to make his last goodbyes. That only leaves August Quigg.
Do you know what you're saying?
Come on, answer that phone. No answer on Quigg's private wire.
You're accusing Frank of murder. He hates Mr. Quigg, yes, but I know he couldn't kill him. He couldn't.
Now, you listen to me. Your husband's cornered, and he's decided to blast his way out of a hopeless situation. I'm going to Quigg's office. If Frank comes back, try to keep him here. But don't try too hard, because it might be dangerous now, even for you. I drove down Sepulveda to the black, hulking plant of Quigg and Slater, pulled over, parked, and walked up the alley toward the side entrance. Through a barred window, I saw the feeble nightlight that glowed in the outer office. Otherwise, the place was dark. When I got to the door, I stopped. A diamond-shaped key stuck out of the lock, and the heavy door was ajar. I eased it open and listened. Nothing. I pulled the key out of the lock and dropped it in my pocket. Then I went inside and switched on the lights. Oh, I found him on the floor next to the desk in his private office. He'd been shot in the chest, point blank, with a .45, which meant that even before he fell, August Quigg was dead. The room was untouched. Quigg's key case lay in the pencil tray on his desk. I snapped it open and saw what I expected. His diamond-shaped key. I switched off the lights and started out. When I heard heels clicking up the hallway, I backed up against the wall and waited. It was Keith Slater. He hesitated in the open door, a startled look on his face.
Good Lord. Quigg.
Hello, Slater.
Who is it?
Marlowe. I wouldn't touch anything if I were you. The police will want to see it just as it is.
Marlowe, he's been murdered. I had no idea Frank would go this far.
Yeah, he's full of surprises tonight. Are you sure he's not carrying any grudges against you?
Frank and I are old friends. That old man in there was different. He wasn't human. He was a machine, a rock crusher with a concrete heart. I'm only sorry it was Frank who did that to him because he'll never be able to get away with it.
He doesn't intend to. Plans to commit suicide any minute now. Tell me something straight, Slater. How does he feel about his wife? Is he jealous?
Jealous? Why, Marlowe, you don't think that he might kill Sheila? I'm going to call her right away.
Wait a minute. If Frank is there, a phone call would only hurry things. Come on, let's go.
I don't like the looks of this, Marlowe.
Neither do I.
Sheila? Frank? Anybody home? They're not here, neither one of them.
Well, if they are, they're not talking.
Oh, you've got a macabre sense of humor.
Nobody's laughing, brother. Look, you check upstairs. I'll see what I can find down here. And for once, I hope it's nothing. I gave the ground floor a fast run-through. It was neat and tidy, from copper-potted ivy on the dining room wall to the sunbeam toastmaster on the breakfast tray. The only thing out of place was a bottle of scotch near the kitchen sink and lipstick on the glass beside it said Sheila. I was back in the living room before I found out why she had needed that bracer. Propped against a bowl of violets on the coffee table were 2 notes pinned together. The top one was for me, from Sheila. It said, "Marlowe, I just found this note from Frank. I'm sure he means that he's going out in our boat, the Carefree. I've got to stop him, Sheila." I turned to Frank's note and was reading it as Slater came down the stairs.
Nothing unusual upstairs, Marlowe, did you? What's that? What have you found?
Frank's suicide note. He asked Sheila to forgive him and forget him. Yeah, read it yourself. I'm going to call the police.
Sure he means that he's going out in our boat to Carefree.
Say.
What's wrong? I thought you were going to call the police.
I was. But I noticed this phone number here on the desk blotter again. It's a tobacco dealer. Slater, I've got a very wacky idea. I'm going to give it a try.
Hello?
Newton Tobacco Shop?
Yes, but we're closed. It's after midnight, you know.
Yeah, I know. This is the police, Mr. Newton. We want some information.
Police? What did you want?
Take it easy. Do you have a customer named Emery, Frank Emery?
Yes. He was in late this afternoon.
What'd he buy?
Tobacco? A special blend I make up for him.
I see. How much of it did he get?
Oh, my. Let me think now. 2 pounds. Yes, that's right. 2 pounds. I'm sure of it.
Man could lay quite a smoke screen with 2 pounds of tobacco, couldn't he? Thanks, Mr. Newton. You've been a big help. What's the matter, Slater? You look troubled. Are you thinking the same thing I am?
I don't know what you're thinking, Marlowe.
This. Mighty weird for a guy who's planning suicide to go buy himself 2 pounds of tobacco a few hours before he blows his brains out. Put it succinctly, pal, I'm thinking that Frank Emery's suicide's a big fat phony.
This is Lieutenant Ibarra.
Marlowe, Ibarra. Catching you at this hour is the best break I've had all night.
How so? What's up, Marlowe?
Guy's been murdered, and his killer, one Frank Emery, is getting away by boat. Can you sell the harbor patrol on running him down for me? It's his own, a sailboat called the Carefree. A 30-footer with an auxiliary motor. He'll be out a ways, off Topanga Canyon.
Well, that can be arranged, but where'll I find you? I'll need some particulars.
I'm going to his beach place. It's in a little cove 2 miles above Santa Monica. There's a pier and a boathouse a couple of 100 yards beyond.
Okay, Marlowe, we'll find it. Now, listen, don't get your feet wet. Wait till we get there.
The Emery beach house was deserted and dark. So Slater and I went on to the boathouse, which was dark, too. But that's where we found Sheila lying on the planks, sobbing out the end of a long, hard cry. Slater ran to her and lifted her to her feet.
Oh, Sheila. Sheila, what happened? Where's Frank?
Oh, please. I was too late. I saw him leave. He waved to me and called goodbye. I begged him to come back, but no, he never will.
Don't be too sure of that, honey.
Oh, what do you mean, Marlowe?
Oh, wait a minute. That boat coming in is probably Ibarra.
Marlowe!
Yeah, here, Ibarra.
I got another boat out looking for the Carefree, Marlowe, so I came directly here.
Who's this? Mrs. Emery, Mr. Slater, Lieutenant Ibarra.
How do you do? Lieutenant? Well, Marlowe, what's it all about?
Well, the embezzler killed his boss, set up a strong case of suicide, and at the moment is pulling a very fast switch.
You mean he's not really checking out? How'd you figure?
He bought 2 pounds of his favorite pipe tobacco today.
What's that?
Wait, Sheila.
Well, that's interesting, Phil, but suicide's a peculiar people.
Okay, but I'll bet you my Sea Scout insignia against a dead jellyfish that he's got a small boat aboard, and that he's going to get off the Carefree and row to shore. How about it, Mrs. Emery? Is there a small boat?
There's a rubber life raft in one of the lockers.
That'll do it. It's all he needs.
Lieutenant Ibarra? Yes, Mooney, what is it?
We just got a call on the radio from the other boat. They've spotted the Carefree running without lights southwest about 2.5 miles offshore. He's holding a steady course, but there's nobody at the wheel. In fact, she seems to be abandoned.
Well, tell him to stand by, but leave her alone. We'll be right out. Well, Marlowe, we'll know in a minute. Let's go, folks. Get aboard.
Sliced through the black swells with the easy grace of a head waiter after a $10 tip. And all the way out, it looked as though Marlowe was going to be the bright boy of the evening. When we pulled alongside the Carefree, made her fast and boarded her, it still looked that way. It looked great, right up to the point when Ibarra peered through the porthole in the closed cabin, jerked the door open, and went inside. After that, it didn't look so good.
Marlowe, come in here. Is this Frank Emery?
Yeah. Yeah, that's him, Ibarra.
He's been shot over the heart from up close with a .45. Undoubtedly the one he still has gripped in his hand there.
Lieutenant Ibarra, is it Frank?
Yeah. You better not come in, Mrs. Emery. Your husband has killed himself.
I walked back to the stern and sat down. Ibarra was going through his grim routine inside, and I felt lousy. I stared down vacantly at my feet and only gradually became aware of the little brass cylinder that danced across the deck with every roll of the boat. I picked it up. It was an ejected cartridge from a .45. I'd found an empty .45 cartridge. All at once, things began to take shape for me.
Ibarra, hold everything. I was right. Emery didn't commit suicide after all.
Phil, the man's body's right here, the gun in his hand.
I know, but he was murdered. Now, look, I found this out on deck, and the door to this cabin was closed. Do you remember? When a man is shot with a .45, he drops. He doesn't walk in, close the door, and then fall.
Well,
Did Emery have any keys on him?
Yes, these are his. They're in the ignition by the wheel.
Sure. Look, this diamond-shaped one. It matches one I've got in my pocket. Come on out on deck, Ibarra, and watch closely. Hey, Slater, can I see your key to the side door of the factory?
Why, certainly, Marlowe. It's right here in my pocket.
It's not in your pocket because it's here in my hand, Slater. You were so excited when you shot Quigg, you ran off and left it sticking in the lock.
No.
And here's one for you, Mrs. Emery. While the Carefree was still tied up at the dock, you stood right here, surprised your husband in the cabin door, and shot him. This little cartridge was ejected back to the stern. But you forgot about that, because after you shoved him inside and put the gun in his hand, you closed the door. Then you started the motor, locked the wheel, and cut the boat loose.
I don't know what you're talking
about. Look out, Ibarra, he's after your gun. That was nice, Ibarra.
Marlowe, I wouldn't have believed this. Don't lose your place, because you'll have to go over it all again.
Don't worry, I won't. You see, it's sort of like an equation. 2 pounds of tobacco and 2 pieces of brass added up to 2 bodies and 2 murderers.
Well, Marlowe, it beats me that Mrs. Emery seemed to be nothing but sweet, soft, and stay-at-home nights.
Yeah. Yes, she pulled one of the richest double crosses on record. Ibarra, she let her husband steal a fortune for her and even helped him plan a fake suicide to get away. Then she turned around and used this plan, only no fake this time, to kill him. So she'd be free to marry Slater.
But you didn't want Slater without the money, right?
Right. As long as August Quigg lives, Slater could never be sure of his income.
So Slater killed him, and they hung that on Frank Emery, too.
Mm-hmm. And they worked a fast routine of pass the detective right through the middle of it all. While Slater killed Quigg, I was with Sheila. Then Slater took me over while she killed Frank.
They make a great team in a shell game, Marlowe.
Yeah.
But you did all right. Well, see you tomorrow, the report, you know. Good night, Phil.
I sat alone on the pier for a long time. I watched the waves come in, and gradually my mind got untangled from the treachery and violence it had been wrapped up in all night. And the lady turned out to be the tiger. And then as my thoughts plowed back through the whole mess of the afternoon when I'd been shopping for Christmas cards, I made up my mind to cancel my order and have an entirely new set printed up. They say it pays to advertise, and if that's true, right across the top of my new cards in big block letters, I'm going to have the words, goodwill toward men. Who knows? Maybe it'll help. Anyway, I hope so.
The Adventures of Philip Marlowe, created by Raymond Chandler, stars Gerald Moore, and is produced and directed by Norman MacDonald. Script by Mel Donnelly, Robert Mitchell, and Gene Levitt. Featured in tonight's cast were Barbara Fuller, Louis Van Rooten, Bill Lally, and Edgar Barrier. Lieutenant Ibarra was played by Jeff Corey. The special music was conceived and conducted by Richard Arant. Be sure and be with us again next week when Philip Marlowe says...
I walked into it smiling because it had all the corny elements. The weird doctor, the beautiful girl, the gloomy house on the windswept cliff, even the hulking menace. Only one thing was missing, the body. And that's when I stopped smiling, because I turned out to be the corpse myself, almost.
When it started, a girl's wedding and New Year's Eve were only 6 hours away, and I didn't think the bride-to-be would make either one of them. But that was before I ran up against the slot machine operator, the escaped convict, and above all, the old acquaintance.
From the pen of Raymond Chandler, outstanding author of crime fiction, comes his most famous character as CBS presents The Adventures of Philip Marlowe. And now, with Gerald Moore, starred as Philip Marlowe, we bring you tonight's exciting story, The Old Acquaintance.
At 6 o'clock in the last evening of the year, I was sitting with my feet up on my office desk thinking of impossible New Year's resolutions and what the girl on my butcher's 1949 calendar would or would not be wearing. But at that present point, there was a soft, almost apologetic knock on my office door. I said, "Come in," and saw a quiet man in quiet clothes who extended a quiet hand. He introduced himself as Paul Riker, a Beverly Hills insurance broker. But the tremor in his voice said, "Very worried client," which on New Year's Eve was something I could do without.
Mr. Marlowe, you've got to find Nancy Marshall for me.
Just for a springboard, Mr. Riker, who is Nancy Marshall?
She's my fiancée. We were to be married at my place in Beverly Hills tonight.
On New Year's Eve?
Yes, you see, it was at a New Year's Eve party a year ago that we met for the first time.
Oh, when'd you last hear from her?
2 hours ago. She called and said that she was in terrible trouble, that nobody, especially the police, could help her, that the wedding was off.
I see. You're sure it's not just a matter of your being left at the altar, huh?
Another man? Oh, no, I'm certain that's not it. Now, please, Mr. Marlowe, will you help me?
Mr. Riker, to you, New Year's Eve means wedding bells, but to me, it's something else, specifically a cozy little apartment on Wilshire Boulevard where there's a very nice girl and a couple of chilled bottles of sham...
Oh, what is it, Mr. Marlowe? What's wrong?
There's somebody outside. Riker, get away from that door, quick! Whoever threw those shots through the frosted glass of my office door wasn't interested in checking up on his marksmanship, because by the time I got to my feet, he was taking the stairs to the street. When I got outside, I was just in time to see him pile into a pickup truck and roar off. The best I could do was get a face full of exhaust fumes and the last 3 numbers on his license plate, which read 711. When I got back to Riker and the glass on my office floor, I found the potential groom whiter, shakier, and less quiet than at our first meeting.
Marlowe, did you get him? Do you know who it was?
No, I don't. Now, relax a minute, Riker, and think.
Yes.
Who could possibly object to you and Nancy getting married?
But that's just it. There's nobody I know of, Mr. Marlowe, and I'm positive that the same is true of Nancy.
All right, now tell me, where does Nancy live?
In a villa at 1428 North Havenhurst Drive, number 12.
Mm-hmm.
But I've already been there, and she's gone.
Were you inside?
No, the door was locked. But, Mr. Marlowe, I thought you had specific plans for this evening.
I do. But from the way things stack up right now, they've got a better chance of keeping than Nancy Marshall. Now, look, go back to your place in Beverly Hills, stay away from frosted glass windows, and wait till you hear from me. We're real lucky, Mr. Riker. It still might turn out to be a happy New Year. When Riker left the office, I called Lieutenant Ibarra at police headquarters. And after being told that it would take at least a half hour to get my kind of lead out of the 7-Eleven I had on the pickup truck's license, I headed for Nancy's villa on North Havenhurst, where it took me 10 minutes to outsmart the catch on the back door. Inside, except for a carelessly overturned box of old snapshots, which meant nothing to me, and a lot of half-open drawers and closets, I was no place. And in the kitchen, where there was a full cup of cold coffee next to an open newspaper, the setup was almost the same. But not quite. Because on the front page of the paper, there was a banner story, complete with pictures, that shouted the news of 3 men who had broken out of the state penitentiary that morning. And one of them, a man named Steve Doyle, had a face that I'd seen only minutes ago on one of the snapshots in the overturned box. I grabbed the paper and started back to check with the snapshot once again for good measure. But the second I stepped into the living room, I stopped.
Hello. I don't believe I know you.
Oh, the voice matched the lady perfectly. She was tall, beautiful brunette, about 30. Wearing a beige metallic wool jersey that covered more curves than a ride on a roller coaster. But the large monogrammed A on her purse meant that this was not the woman who had planned to marry Paul Riker.
I said I don't believe I know you.
The name is Arthur Murray. You're late for your rumble lesson.
Oh, never mind the jokes, bright boy. It's a waste of your time and mine.
All right, then we'll play it very straight. Name is Philip Marlowe. I'm a private detective, and I'm working for a very worried man. Now you, what's your connection with Nancy Marshall?
I'm just, shall we say, an old acquaintance? That's all.
Not enough. I'll prime the pump some more. I was hired to find Nancy, who seems to be in a lot of trouble. And coincidentally in trouble on the same day that Steve Doyle breaks out of stir. Now, once more, exactly where do you fit in?
I don't think I'll tell you, Mr. Marlowe. If you don't mind.
Well, pearl-handled, huh? How very chic.
But deadly. Now get in that closet there, Marlowe. Go on.
All right. But just so we don't go through this same routine when we meet again, and we will, who are you?
Oh, you don't listen very carefully, Marlowe. I've already told you that I'm an old acquaintance. It's the season for them, remember? Now get in there and shut up.
Nancy Marshall's villa was post-war construction at its worst, closets included. So I didn't stay tucked away with the mothballs any longer than it takes to say old acquaintance. The minute I'd kicked my way out, I went right for the telephone and my only 100% bona fide lead. The number's 711.
This is Lieutenant Ibarra.
Marlowe, Ibarra. Anything for me on that license number?
Oh, yeah. If you're sure it was a pickup truck, the chances are pretty good that it either belongs to a party named Maurice J. Calder at 409 South Main or one Jerome Graff, 3221 and a half Melrose Avenue.
Check.
What's up, Phil? Anything I might be interested in?
That depends. Ever hear of a guy named Steve Doyle?
One of that gang that broke out this morning?
The very same. Matter of fact, he's probably driving that pickup truck right now.
Oh.
But look, Ibarra, I think I know what I'm doing, so how about letting me run this end of it until I get stuck?
Well,
There's a girl named Nancy Marshall mixed up in this, and a delay at this time might cost her life.
All right, I'll stay clear, Phil, for a while.
Good.
But just so you don't get too careless, remember, Doyle got out of jail this morning the hard way. He killed 2 guards.
Oh, fine.
Goodbye, Marlowe.
When I got to 409 South Main, I knew that my first choice had to be wrong, because Maurice J. Calder turned out to be a bankrupt junkman, and his pickup truck, which was loaded with everything, including the kitchen sink, had 3 flat tires and hadn't moved in a week. So if the numerals 711 were going to live up to their reputation, Jerome Graff had to be my man. And that made the time to be careful now. 3221 and a half Melrose was a tired cottage set back about 50 weed-covered feet from the sidewalk. And from the rusted sign, Jerry Graff, mechanic, dangling at a crazy angle from a weather-beaten beam over the front door. I gathered that the place doubled as both Mr. Graff's living quarters and shop. I didn't see any truck out front, so I decided to try the alley in the rear before I knocked on any door. It was then that I noticed for the first time that I was being watched by a short man with a long face who was slouched against a nearby tree like a marionette with no strings attached.
If you're lost, mister, maybe I can help you.
Maybe? I was looking for a pickup truck. Seen one around?
A pickup truck?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wonder what that could be.
Well, it's a small deal, about a half a ton, and... Oh, I get it. Okay, here. Here's 5. Now my question.
Jerry Graff owns a pickup truck, but it ain't here. It's been out since dark. But Jerry's in. He's working late tonight.
Working at what? Come on, you got your 5. Talk.
Okay. It ain't no secret. Jerry's a nursemaid for one-armed bandits.
Slot machines, huh? Is that his racket?
Yeah. He used to be a big boy with them, too. But times have changed. Now he just works on them for other guys.
What other guys?
Oh, mister, I wouldn't answer that for even another 5. I wouldn't stay in business very long if I did. But I'll tell you one thing for free in case you're going to visit Jerry.
What's that?
Watch out for him. He's a very nasty man.
Thanks, but I can take care of myself, Buster.
What do you want?
Information. Where's your pickup truck, Graff?
Somebody stole it, but he didn't leave his card. Why, what are you, a private dick?
That's right, but one that works close to the law. So why don't we call the boys in blue and tell them all about it?
The cops? No, wait a minute. I don't like the law pattern around here. Come on in. I'll tell you what you want to know.
Let's not skip any of the details, huh? Like, for example, the name Steve Doyle.
Doyle? I don't know. Well, okay, fella, you win. The story goes something like this.
Want to try again?
Maybe a monkey wrench will convince you.
You don't throw any straight in your talk, Crap. Come on. What do you say? Do we play some more? Come on, talk. Come on. Come on.
Wait on it. I'll talk.
All right.
I've had enough.
So far, I know a girl named Nancy Marshall's in some kind of trouble because Steve Doyle broke out of the pen this morning. Now, you fill in the blanks.
Oh, sure. Why not? Oh, Steve Doyle, he used to be crazy about Nancy, but she didn't go for him. Then about a year ago, a little more maybe, Steve got picked up for knocking over a grocery store. He figured he was caught because Nancy tipped the law to get him out of her hair.
Now he's out to get Nancy for revenge. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. And anyone who's close to her gets the same treatment.
Oh, chummy. Now tell me, was Doyle here? Is he the one who's driving your pickup truck?
Yeah, but it wasn't my idea. He shoved a gun in my face, said we were old friends, and asked for the keys.
You know where he is now?
No, but if I did, I'd keep it to myself. Doyle's full of hate, brother. You can count on that. Now, what do you say about clearing out of here?
Just as soon as I find out one more thing. Now, there's another girl mixed up in this. She's a brunette with a lot of curves and the initial A. Calls herself an old acquaintance of Nancy's. Any idea who she is?
No, not the slightest.
You're a liar, Graff, and if I had time, I'd beat the truth out
No,
of you.
you haven't, believe me, because if you don't hustle, mister, when you do catch up with Nancy Marshall, you're going to catch up with a corpse. Nothing more.
When I got outside, two things stood out in my mind like a pair of cleats at Carnegie Hall. First, my client's fiancée was not the most innocent dame in greater Los Angeles. And second, I wasn't going to get any place until I could locate the old acquaintance. But then, just as I started for my car, the slouch who had sold me the dirty thumbnail sketch on Jerry Graff came running toward me.
Hey, mister. Did everything work out all right? I was called away on some other business, or I'd have been here waiting.
Waiting for what?
Well, you know, in my game, I now and again give a guy a little more dope than he bargained for, and in that case, I sometimes end up with a bonus, so to speak.
Well, right now, we're about even. But if you can tell me anything about a beautiful brunette whose first name starts with an A, I'll give you a bonus that'll keep you in beer and pretzels from now until the 4th of July.
A name that begins with an A?
Yeah.
Hey, she visited with Graff this morning, maybe?
Yeah, it's possible. Come on, think hard.
She's kind of tall, dresses like $1 million.
That's right. Now, what's her name? Here, look. $20 bill. Her name, what is it?
It's, yeah, I got it. Adrian Starr, 1312 Lookout Mountain Road.
How do you know that?
It was on the registration card in her car. I took a peek while she was... Trouble at Graff's. I'll take my 20. Goodbye.
I beat it up the walk to Graff's, and when I got inside, I found exactly what I expected. Doubled up on the floor in the middle of a lot of oily machine parts and still holding his stomach with both hands was Jerome Graff, a very dead man. I started for a telephone to call Lieutenant Ibarra, but then I noticed something small and gold lying a few feet away from the body. When I picked it up, I saw it was an ornamental buckle, the kind that a lady might wear on a coat. So I decided to skip Lieutenant Ibarra for the time being and call my client instead.
Hello?
This is Marlowe, Riker.
Oh, yes, Marlowe. What is it? What have you found out?
Quite a bit. But first, I've got to know one thing. Does Nancy Marshall have a gold belt buckle?
A gold belt buckle?
Yeah.
Why, yes, she does on her black coat. But what about it, Marlowe? What does it mean?
I'm not sure, Mr. Riker. But it may mean that Nancy Marshall just killed a man.
In just a moment, we will return to the second act of the adventures of Philip Marlowe. But first, by this time, a week from tonight, Jack Benny will have made his first broadcast exclusively on the CBS network. Starting next Sunday, you'll find Jack here with Mary Livingston, Phil Harris, Rochester, Dennis Day, Don Wilson, and all the others who have made the Jack Benny Show a regular Sunday evening delight for millions of Americans. Just for fun, the Jack Benny kind of fun, make a New Year's resolution to hear the Jack Benny Show every Sunday starting a week from tonight, January 2nd, over these same CBS network stations. And now, with our star, Gerald Moore, we return to the second act of Philip Marlowe and tonight's story, The Old Acquaintance.
And I told Paul Riker that the chances were good that his bride-to-be had just knocked off a slot machine operator. My client reacted like I'd kicked him in the stomach. When he caught his breath again, he started telling me I was wrong and didn't stop until I hung up on him. Next thing on the agenda was that call to Lieutenant Ibarra.
Lieutenant Ibarra speaking.
Marlowe again, Lieutenant.
Oh, did you find the owner of that pickup truck, Phil?
Yeah, I found him, Ibarra. I'm calling from his shop now. I had a talk with the guy. It was Jerry Graff.
What do you mean, was Jerry Graff?
Well, somebody came in here and shot him just after I left. He's dead. He knew Steve Doyle all right, but I'm pretty sure Doyle didn't kill him, Ibarra.
No, then who did? Any idea, Marlowe?
Well, looks very much like my client's fiancée, Nancy Marshall. I still don't know where she is or how it all fits together, but look, I got a lead on an old acquaintance of Nancy's named Adrian Starr. She lives up on Lookout Mountain Road. Now, if you don't hear from me in, say, an hour, you might check. Number 1312. That's my next stop.
Okay, just be sure it's not your last stop. Goodbye.
I drove up Laurel Canyon to Lookout Mountain. And the only sign of life was a young couple parked where they could look down at the city lights, if they wanted to. I backed into a bushy driveway across from Adrian Starr's bungalow and stopped. It was small, modern, and looked deserted, except for one dim light upstairs. I was about to get out and verify that when a pair of headlights flashed down the road and a yellow convertible swept to a halt in front of the place. It was Adrian Starr who got out. She started up the walk toward her front door, stopped suddenly, and then ran back to her car and drove off again. I kept the yellow convertible in sight. When it turned on Havenhurst and stopped in front of Nancy Marshall's villa, I pulled up in time to see Adrian step inside and close the door. So I followed her.
Marlowe, what do you want?
I want to know what Jerry Graff means to you, Adrian.
I don't know any Jerry Graff, so it means nothing.
Come on, stop it. You went down to his shop to see him this morning. I thought you might like to know that he's dead.
Dead?
Mm-hmm. The cops are hungry for anybody who so much as knew his name. Maybe I better come inside and talk it over, don't you think?
Yeah, maybe better. Just a minute.
Thanks. Hey, it's dark. Why don't you turn on more lights?
Because I like it this way.
Okay. But, honey, if you've still got that pearl-handled popcorn of yours, let's leave it out of the conversation. And let's make it straight. Why'd you drop in on Graff this morning?
Because I knew that sooner or later Steve Doyle would head there. I had to know if Steve intended to leave town or was still determined to get his crazy revenge.
And all for Nancy Marshall, huh? You know, you're sticking your neck out quite a ways just for old time's sake, baby. Steve Doyle's a pretty tricky guy to mix with at this point.
You can say that again, Phil.
Steve? Oh, Steve.
Steve Doyle.
That's right. Who are you, mister?
Marlowe, private detective.
Sit down over there, private detective. Keep your hands out of your pockets. I don't like you because you're half cop, but play it smart and you won't get hurt. Well, Adrian, like old home week, huh?
Oh, it's been a long time, Steve.
Yeah, it sure has. Where is she, Adrian? Where's Nancy?
I don't know, Steve.
You're lying to me. This is her place. You got in with a key. You've been down to see Graff. You know where she is, all right. So tell me and tell me fast.
Oh, Steve, listen, forget it. Forget about Nancy. This revenge will only get you in the gas chamber. Please, let's get away. We can still make it across the border. Please take me with you. I love you, Steve, just like I always have, even when you threw me over for Nancy.
Shut up. Just tell me where Nancy is. Come on, Adrian.
I don't know, Steve.
Stop it, Doyle.
Where is she?
Steve, you're hurting me.
Doyle.
Don't move, Marlowe. All right, fella, I told you to behave. I've been through a lot, and I'm tired, and I'm running out of time. You're getting in my hair, and that's bad.
Oh, no, Steve, don't.
I won't shoot him. I can't afford the noise. I can give him something just as good. Oh! Now, Adrian, try again. Where's Nancy?
I don't know, Steve.
Come on, where is she?
I don't know.
Where's
Please?
Nancy?
I don't know.
Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?
I couldn't remember where I was or how long I'd been lying there, but gradually I got the crazy idea that I was being robbed by a very unhappy crook because I was sure that somebody was crying and going through my pockets at the same time. Oh, I tried to open my eyes, but all I could see was a little gold buckle danced back and forth in front of me.
When it finally disappeared altogether, I rolled over and hauled myself up onto my knees. And then it all came rushing back to me. I'd been in Nancy Marshall's villa with Steve Doyle and Adrian Starr. Only they were gone now, and I was alone. I heard a car start outside, so I got on my feet and made it along the wall to the door. It was Adrian, and she was behind the wheel of my coupe.
Stay away from me, Marlowe.
Where's Doyle?
He took my car. He's going up to Nancy. I've got to stop him, Marlowe, so get out of the way.
Somehow I managed to jump back just in time to keep from getting a press job with the tread of my own fist tires. And it took 10 minutes of steady concentration to get it through my throbbing head that Adrian had actually stolen my car and was gone. Oh, the cold air must have helped me because one thought led to another, and I finally began to separate the facts from the fancies. I hadn't dreamed all I thought I had. And when I realized that, the whole idea hit me and hit me hard. I knew that I'd better get out to Lookout Mountain in a hurry. I made it to Sunset, hailed a cab, and collapsed in it.
Where to, mister?
Lookout Mountain Road. Make it fast.
Oh, it's rugged in this crap. New Year's Eve, you know.
Here's $10. Does that help? It's important.
Oh, it helps plenty. I know a great shortcut, a new road that's not yet finished. But how are you on bumps?
A few more won't matter, pal. Let's go. When it was over, I felt like I'd crossed the country on a pogo stick. But the cab driver was a genius, and with a shortcut, we made the distance to Lookout Mountain in less than 10 minutes. When we got near the place, I sent the cab back down the hill out of danger. Went the rest of the way on foot. As I got within sight of Adrian's bungalow, I saw Steve Doyle getting out of the yellow convertible. I ran up to the house, tried the door. It was locked.
Nancy, where are you? I know you're in there, baby. I'm going to find you. I have to take this joint apart. We've got some old business to settle, remember?
So have we, Doyle. Drop that gun. Stand still.
Okay, sucker. Go.
You won't need that gun anymore, Doyle. Just kick it over there out of the way.
Someday I'll get you for this fella.
I doubt it, Steve. You're all finished, but you're too thick-headed to see it. Well, I guess it's time to relax and wait for Adrian. Then we call the cops, huh?
Adrian just arrived, Marlowe. Don't
What?
turn around or I'll kill you.
Adrian.
There we are, Marlowe. Toss your gun back here to me. Come on now. It's better. Oh, Steve. Steve, are you hurt bad, darling? Can you make it to the car?
I'll try, Adrian. Got me on this side. It's bad.
Oh, Steve, hurry, darling, hurry. I'll be with you in a minute.
I'll make it okay.
Well, Marlowe?
Yeah. Okay, Adrian.
Tell me one thing first, Marlowe. Did Steve get to Nancy?
No. You killed Graff in time to shut him up, too, huh? So Steve will never know the truth, will he, Adrian? Could be it was you who crossed him and sent him to prison.
You'll never find out. Not now. And you'll never realize how much I love him either. That's why I did it, Marlowe. It was the only way I could hold him for myself. And I was willing to wait. Can you understand that?
Yeah. I guess I can. Too bad a love like yours has to be wasted on a guy like Steve. You'll never get away, honey. Not with him. You'll never make it.
Maybe not. But if he goes out, at least I'll be with him, Marlowe, and that's the way I want it.
Well, if you're going to do anything, Adrian, you better get it over with fast. That siren's a friend of mine. He's coming here.
Adrian! Coming, Steve. You're a good guy, Marlowe, and a smart one. Just don't follow us, that's all. So long, Marlowe. Happy New Year.
Marlowe, that corner just pull out of here. Who was in it?
Steve Doyle and Adrian Starr, Ibarra.
That road makes a horseshoe turn. That'll bring them out down below us there at that junction. I've got one of those streets blocked, but the other one's wide open.
Look, Ibarra, there they are. She's stopping at the crossroad.
Yeah, they've spotted my men down there. She's turning around. They're heading out the other way. She must be crazy, Marlowe. They'll never make that curve at that speed.
They're not slowing down, Ibarra. She's heading straight for that stone wall.
Well, Speed, that's it. It's all over. They're both dead when the boys got to them. Killed instantly. By the way, how's your head feel now? Any better?
I'm okay, Burr.
Did you take care of Nancy Marshall all right?
Yeah, she locked herself upstairs. Sent her home to Paul Riker in the squad car. The driver hurries, they can still be married on New Year's Eve.
You had her pegged as Jerry Graff's killer earlier tonight, Marlowe. What made you change your mind?
Well, I found a gold buckle near Graff's body, Burr. I figured it was a fancy little belt buckle that Nancy had dropped. But I saw exactly the same buckle when I was coming to after Doyle hit me on the head. And it wasn't on a belt, it was on a shoe. Adrian's shoe. It was the mate to the one I'd found.
Once you knew Adrian Starr killed Graff, you put the rest of it together, is that it?
Uh-huh. See, for a price, Graff helped Adrian double-cross Steve. She had to kill him to keep him from talking. She hid Nancy out for the same reason. If she knew that if Steve ever got to Nancy, he'd learn the truth.
I wonder why she didn't kill Nancy, too.
I think she intended to, Ibarra.
And she did it all, really, because she loved the guy too much. Strange deal, Marlowe, right to the end. You know, she didn't have a chance to make that curve down there the way she was driving.
Not even if she wanted to make it, Ibarra.
Yeah. Well, it's 5 minutes to midnight, Phil. Happy New Year, fella. I want to see a lot of you in 1949.
Same to you, Lieutenant. Good night. After Ibarra and the others left, I stayed up on Lookout Mountain and watched the new year come to Los Angeles. A new year. Didn't seem to change things much, at least on the surface. Somewhere down the road, a gang struck up Old Lang Syne. I thought again of Adrian Starr, a girl who loved not wisely, who had called herself an old acquaintance. Yeah, I'd never forget her. As I walked back to my car, the city was ringing out the old and ringing in the new. And I wished then that someplace on everybody's list of resolutions, they'd make room for that cup of kindness they were singing about. And then a guy could say, Happy New Year, and mean it.
The Adventures of Philip Marlowe, created by Raymond Chandler, stars Gerald Moore and is produced and directed by Norman MacDonald. Script is by Mel Donnelly, Robert Mitchell, and Gene Levitt. Featured in the cast were Gloria Blondell, Edgar Barrier, David Ellis, Lou Krugman, and Stan Waxman. Lieutenant Ibarra was played by Jeff Corey. The special music was by Richard Arant. Be sure and be with us again next week when Philip Marlowe says...
They all knew he was aboard the yacht when it exploded and sank. And everybody called his death an accident. Yeah, that is everybody except the corpse himself. He said it was murder.
An hour of wonderful, delirious comedy is still to come to you tonight on CBS. You'll soon hear Hollywood's Eve Arden starring as the unusual schoolmistress, our Miss Brooks. Later, Lum and Abner will open the doors of the Jot 'em Down store in Pine Ridge, Arkansas, and let you stock up on the last from their never-failing supply of wisdom and good humor. Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden, is heard at 9:30, and Lum and Abner at 10 o'clock, both Eastern Standard Time, over most of these same CBS network stations. This is Roy Rowan speaking for CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
They all knew he was aboard the yacht when it exploded and sank, and everybody called his death an accident. That is, everybody except the corpse himself. He said it was murder.
From the pen of Raymond Chandler, outstanding author of crime fiction, comes his most famous character as CBS presents The Adventures of Philip Marlowe. And now, with Gerald Moore, starred as Philip Marlowe, we bring you tonight's exciting story, The Restless Day.
It had been a long, hard Saturday night that topped off a long, rugged week. When I finally got to bed dog-tired at 5 a.m. Sunday morning, I was planning to stay there until I'd caught up on all the sleep I'd lost and gained a running head start on the coming week. And by 3 in the afternoon on the day of rest, I figured that job was only about half done. But whoever it was that started riding my doorbell had a different idea. I held out until the buzzer stopped, but it was only a change of tactics, so I gave up. All right, I know when I'm licked. Just a minute.
Thank heaven you're in, Mr. Marlowe. I don't know what I'd have done otherwise. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Here, read this story on the front page.
What?
No, down here.
Oh, yacht explosion, death label accident, huh?
Yes.
Mystery blast which destroyed the Rollins yacht at Santa Monica Friday night, and in which Benjamin Rollins, noted cosmetics manufacturer, was killed, was established today by police investigators as accidental.
Sorry, I smoked too much.
That's all right. The explosion which shattered and sank the 50-foot pleasure boat was caused by a leaking fuel line. Rollins, known to be a chain smoker, is believed by witnesses to have continued on page 7.
Never mind, Marlowe. I'll tell the rest.
Yeah. Think you'll make it?
There are two frightening things wrong with that story.
Well, go ahead. Frighten me.
First, the explosion was no accident. That fuel line was repaired a week ago. Second, Ben Rollins was not killed.
You're shaking my faith in the American press. How do you know all this?
Because I am Benjamin Rollins.
Yes. Well, look, fella, you better dial 116 on the phone and tell the police all about it, huh?
No, that's exactly what I can't do. Someone's tried to murder me. If they find out I'm still alive, I'll be a target for a second attempt.
Wait a minute. I need two things right now. One, a cup of coffee. Would you like some?
No, milk, if you please. My doctor insists.
Okay, come on. The other's a good, solid explanation of why everybody thinks you were aboard that yacht.
Well, first, they believe my body was lost in the explosion. You see, I intended to spend the night there because Lucille, my wife, and I had quarreled.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a call, and I had to go out of town on business at the last minute. I went out to the boat, but only to pick up some papers. I was in a hurry. I must have left the lights on. I lost my hat in the wind on the way back. It was found in the water. Apparently, I didn't secure the dinghy because that was adrift offshore. Mind you, I read all this in the paper when I got back this morning.
Back from where?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Figures.
I came in on the California Limited. You can check on that. Marlowe, I must know who tried to kill me before they know they've failed.
That could be tough. Have you got any ideas?
Yes, I have. It might be any one of 3 people.
3?
For instance, Walter Pittman, my ex-partner, threatened to kill me less than a month ago in New York when I won another court decision from him.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's my business manager, a fellow named Slater. I almost fired him last week, the arrogant fool. It's always when I get cross this comes out.
I see.
And I'm sorry to say it, but Mrs. Rollins would no doubt rather have me dead than alive. That's quite a lineup for a mere cosmetics chemist, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Look, you haven't been running lipstick experiments with somebody else's live equipment, have you, Rollins?
Oh, certainly not. I've been working so hard I haven't time for my wife. To say nothing of another woman. Oh, Marlowe, I'm frightened. I must get to the bottom of this. I'll pay you double your usual fee. Will you help me?
Okay, Rollins, it's a deal. If I hurry, I might get in on your funeral. Under the circumstances, that should make somebody due for a very big surprise. Shave and a shower later, and I checked my wheezing client's credentials, settled him down in my apartment with orders to answer the phone, but not the door, and drove out to Santa Monica, where the not-very-late Ben Rollins had made his home. I had a list of names, addresses, and phone numbers of people close to Rollins. That is, close enough to kill. And I decided that Arthur Slater, the business manager, was my best bet for an opener. He had been described as soft-spoken, efficient, and somewhat arrogant. And after I found his cottage on Seaview Drive and walked up to the door, I heard someone inside offering a similar description, but with more color.
Mighty routine, Arthur Slater. If you think for 2 minutes you can throw little Angie over any time you feel like it after all the promises you've made, you're wrong.
That's just about enough, Angie.
Not by half, brother. I know which way the wind is blowing, and it's a nice big wind. Nobody kicks me out, and I mean nobody. So think it over, Mr. Big. Oh, get out of my way.
Yes, ma'am. Cute kid. Friend of yours, Slater?
Who are you?
Another insurance investigator?
That's right. My name's Marlowe. May I come in?
Yes, certainly. All the others did.
Thanks. Who knows? I may be the last. Slater, I've got 3 reasons for believing that yacht explosion was no accident.
Not an accident? What reasons are you talking about?
For one, Walter Pittman.
Pittman? You mean Rollins' ex-partner?
You know him, huh?
Well, only by name. I never met the man.
All right, then. Let's talk about reason number 2, Lucille Rollins. How do you feel about her, Slater?
Well, you must be out of your mind, Marlowe. She and Ben fought constantly, yes.
Slater, I asked how you felt about Mrs. Rollins.
I don't like her. And now, what or who is reason number 3?
You are. You had an argument with Rollins last week. He practically fired you.
And you think I'd kill him over that?
Could be.
Look, Marlowe, Ben Rollins drove himself like an overloaded truck. He had a cigarette cough, nervous shakes, and bad dreams. To me, bureau drawer eyelashes and glue-on fingernails simply aren't that important. So we had frequent arguments. Now, do you have any more smart reasons you'd like to discuss, or would you care to leave?
Just one thing more. Why does your girlfriend think you're a little stuck up these days?
You're becoming a bit too personal, Marlowe. Get out. I'm not compelled to answer any of your questions. There's an established legal procedure.
Skip it, Slater. If I need to, I'll be back. And I'm fairly chummy with the boys in blue myself, so I'll get the answers if I want them. Good night, Big Shot. Arthur Slater was like a billiard ball, hard to rub the wrong way. And if he did have an angle, he was playing cagey. So as long as I was in the neighborhood and the trail was hot, I figured I'd have a talk with the Spitfire, Angie. It wasn't hard to trail her. The corner newsboy had heard her get into a cab. The cabbie swore he'd never forget her. Swore again. So finding her apartment was less trouble than unfolding a $5 bill. When I pulled up across the street from her place, I noticed a big car as big as the average garage and older than last year's college graduate parked in front. It was a black Pierce Arrow, and someone with a mouthful of cigar hulked behind the wheel. The cigar was pointed at me as I crossed the street. And when I went up the stairs to Angie's door, it was still pointed at me. But I forgot about that when the apartment door opened. Angie was relaxed. There were little glints of gold in her green eyes, and the warm lights behind her shimmered on soft waves of hair, a shade of burnished copper. Maybe she was a Spitfire, but at the moment, her damper was down.
Yeah? Well, Buster, you got your mouth open. You might as well say something.
Angie, who do you think murdered Ben Rollins?
Murdered? My mistake, chum. Good night.
Just a minute. This is business, honey.
Who are you, anyhow?
Philip Marlowe. You ran over me on your way out of Slater's place a few minutes ago and dented my ego.
Well, sue me. Who are you working for, Shamus?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you. But I will tell you this, sweetheart. The explosion on that yacht was no accident. So I'm checking up on wives who'd rather be widows.
Lucille Rollins?
Mm-hmm.
Nuts. She was rolling in dough either way. She hated her job, but she sure didn't have to kill to quit. Get your compass fixed, Marlowe.
Wrong way, huh? Well, suppose Lucille were in love with Pittman, maybe.
Pittman? Who's he?
Shot in the dark. Tell me something, Angie. Your boyfriend Slater has picked up a lot of push lately. How come?
Some big deal they've been working on at the plant. And he makes me sick. Gets the first sniff of a success, and suddenly all his hats are too small.
Especially his old hats, honey. And you can't blame the guy if he's really on his way up now, can you?
Listen, Mac, I'll tell you, him, and the whole world something. Nobody is going to put little Angie on the skids. If there's a heave-ho pulled around here, Mr. Hotshot Slater himself will get it, and right in the neck. So if you happen to be snooping for him, Marlowe, you can putter right back and tell him so. Now beat it.
That's not a bad idea. Oh, by the way, what's Angie stand for?
Angelica? But don't count on it, brother. Don't count on it.
As I went down the front steps, the cigar and the black Pierce Arrow lined up on me again and followed me as I crossed the street and got into my car. It was still pointing at me as I drove away, but after all, the street was public property and a guy could smoke a cigar if he wanted to. Well, by the time I knocked on the front door of the Rollins home, I was braced for a deluge of tears and a session of red-eyed hysteria. So I was caught off balance by the handsome blonde woman of 35 with a wry, crisp waistline who was cool, calm, and well-collected in green slacks. She introduced herself as Lucille Rollins.
Sit down, Mr. Marlowe. You said you're a friend of Ben's?
That's right, Mrs. Rollins. I stopped by to offer my condolences. But apparently condolences aren't much in order today. No tears, huh?
Not even crocodile tears.
I'm not a hypocrite, Mr. Marlowe, that's why. I'm merely stunned and confused over this terrible accident, and I'm not sure yet how I feel.
Yeah, it was an accident, all right. Especially since that leaky fuel line that caused it was repaired a week ago.
It had been repaired?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it?
Who are you, Marlowe?
I'm a private detective, and I know a lot more than that. I know, for instance, that the insurance on the boat alone will keep you and pretty doodads for several years. And that's only a drop in a bucket.
Mr. Marlowe, I think you'd better leave.
And I think you better climb down off that high horse and listen. Because I haven't even started yet. Ben was a hated man by Pittman, by Slater, and maybe by you. And I can prove he didn't die accidentally, baby, so I'd like some nice straight answers, huh? When did you see Pittman last?
I've never seen Walter Pittman. I don't even know what he looks like. Ben and I were married 2 years ago. He broke with Pittman long before that.
But you're pretty chummy with Arthur Slater.
That's a lie. Why, we hardly spoke until a week ago.
You picked a poor time to get friendly, baby.
Listen here, Marlowe. Mr. Slater, I ran into each other purely by accident one afternoon last week. I happened to stop in at a small bar in downtown Los Angeles. Mr. Slater was there at a table talking with some man, a stranger to me. When he saw me, he came over. He seemed upset. So upset.
Wait a
in
minute.
fact, that he...
Is there anyone else here now?
Well, no. My maid went out to the movies. What's the matter?
I heard something, a noise. Sounded like it came from the service boys. Come on, let's have a look.
Well, I don't know what any...
Hey!
The lights went off.
Somebody turned them off. You better... Lucille, look out! The bullets, which had been intended for Lucille, had only traveled the width of the kitchen, but miraculously both had missed. Whoever had thrown them moved out fast, because when I got through the service porch and into the backyard, nothing stirred, except the restless ends of a pepper tree. But a second later, a heavy, clanking motor roared on the side street. And I got to the fence just in time to see a boxcar on rubber tires skid around the corner. It was a black Pierce Arrow. I went back to the house, found the master switch, and turned on the lights. Lucille, her face strained and bloodless, stood in the kitchen door and watched me. A hole had been punched in the back screen door, and on the floor was a strange object which had been used to unhook the lock. It looked like an oversized bobby pin wearing rubber pants, which didn't mean a thing to me. But to Lucille, who stared at it like it was a centipede she just found in a cream puff, it meant plenty.
Ben.
What?
It's like Ben himself was here. Like he wasn't killed at all.
What are you talking about? What is this thing, anyway?
I don't know. Part of some new invention he was working on. For the last month, Ben carried 2 or 3 of these things with him everywhere.
Look, Lucille, where's your phone?
Right there.
Oh.
But, Marlowe, you don't suppose... Who are you going to call?
Friend of mine. He'd better be in, too. Go.
Marlowe. What's the matter, Marlowe? Busy?
Yeah, busy. He's either talking to someone or he's gone out after leaving the phone off the hook. And either way, Lucy, that makes my friend very busy.
In just a moment, we will return to the second act of the adventures of Philip Marlowe. But first, it may have taken a little detective work finding a much-wanted man last week, but an unprecedented number of listeners seem to have turned Philip Marlowe. For Jack Benny's largest audience this season found him here on his opening show on CBS. Tomorrow night, Jack will be back with Mary, Dennis, Phil, Rochester, and Don for more of the fun that's made the Jack Benny Show the #1 comedy in radio. You'll find him right here on CBS every Sunday at 7 Eastern Standard Time. And now, with our star, Gerald Moore, we return to the second act of Philip Marlowe and tonight's story, The Restless Day.
When I left Lucille Rawlins, the feminine target for tonight, I headed for Angie Gordon's, where I'd first seen the man with a cigar in his face, who I suddenly figured might be Walter Pittman. And as I drove, I felt like my brains had spent the night playing leapfrog in a squirrel cage. Because any way I call the dice, every one of my clients suspected of murdering him somebody else. And just to keep things from making any sense at all, I suspected my client. I pulled up near Angie's and saw the Pierce Arrow parked, lights and a man with cigar out. When I got close to the bungalow door, I knew that the lady was at home.
Now, look here,
and that she was receiving a gentleman caller, more or less.
Tell me your name is Smith, which incidentally I don't believe. And then you start asking a lot of very personal questions. How cozy.
Now, please, you do not understand.
There are certain things about the death of Ben Rawlins that I must know. Things that mean a lot to me.
How much a lot?
Well, $100, maybe.
What? Now, don't tell me that's all you could stuff into that briefcase there in your hand.
Listen, girl, I must know whether that explosion on the boat was an accident or not.
The police let it go as an accident?
Never mind that. You are Slater's girl. You must know something about him as well as the other one who was here. Now, you tell me. Quick.
Stay away from me, you big lug. I don't know anything.
Let
Let
me-
go of me, Ma. Let go.
You heard the lady, Pittman. Let go.
How do you know my name?
I read tea leaves. And while we're all asking questions, do you mind telling me why you were throwing bullets at the Chinaware on Mrs. Rawlins?
I did no such thing. I don't even know Mrs. Rawlins.
You're a liar, and it's dull as the sauerkraut. The gun in your pocket will prove it.
I have no gun in my pocket. Here, look for yourself.
All right, I will. But if it's all the same to you, I'll start with your briefcase.
Give me that.
Why, so you can get to the gun first?
No, because All right, Mr. Smart Man. Go ahead and look. See for yourself that there's absolutely nothing there that concerns you.
When I get my hands on you, I'll break you in
Still,
two.
Marlowe. And don't look so astonished, friend. It's called a gun.
Why, you little...
Skip it, Marlowe. This isn't my idea of returning a favor, but it is good business. You see, baby, little Angie sells out to the highest bidder. And no matter how I add things up, that isn't you.
So exit Pittman, huh? Briefcase and...
What are you staring at?
That little gadget there. Must have fallen out of Pittman's briefcase.
What is it?
Twin brother of an item I found a little while ago, rubber pants included.
What are you talking about, Marlowe?
Nothing, baby. Just tell me how long I sit here.
As long as you like. Now, you see, Marlowe, I just can't afford to let you get to Pittman ahead of me.
Yeah. That good business you were talking about.
Uh-huh. After all, a gal's got to make a living. One way or another, Marlowe. Doesn't she?
There was room to debate Angie's point, but no time. So I skipped her invitation for a drink. Both promised and threatened to see her again and headed for my car in the only direction left, the residence of the local pivot man, Mr. Arthur Slater. When I got to within a block of the place, I parked and then approached slowly, keeping to the shadows all the way. But the house turned out to be as dark and quiet as the inside of a coffin. I was about to leave when some noise a dozen yards behind me said that I was no longer alone. I turned quietly and got ready for what I figured would be a reunion with my old buddy, Walter Pittman. But I was wrong. Sneaking through a nearby clump of orange trees with all the deftness of an ox with bunion trouble was no one else but my client, Ben Rawlins. When I called his name out loud, he ran toward me, arms and legs flailing the wind like a Kansas scarecrow caught in a tornado.
Marlowe, I've been looking all over for you.
Rollins, why aren't you back in my apartment where you're supposed to be?
I couldn't wait any longer. I was afraid something had happened to you. When you didn't call, I was sure of it. I thought you might be here at Slater's.
But I did call, and all I got was a busy signal.
Oh, about an hour ago. Why, that was a friend of yours. He wanted to know if you'd play cards with him tonight. Now, do you believe me?
Oh, for the time being, yes. Incidentally, Rollins, do these mean anything to you, these oversized bobby pins?
Good Lord, the curlers. Where did you get those curlers, Marlowe? They should be in my safe.
Well, I found one at your house and the other in a briefcase that belonged to Walter Pittman.
But, Marlowe, these are samples of my newest invention, these hair curlers. They can produce a home permanent wave overnight that will last for 6 months. It's worth millions to me.
If you live.
Yes. Now, it should be easy to figure out who wanted to kill me.
I'm not so sure. If you didn't even know these were missing, why should someone have to kill you to get hold of them? And second of all, how come the shooting's still going on?
What shooting are you talking about?
Over at your place. Somebody tried to kill your wife there just before I called you. And that brings us right back to your alibi about talking to Ibarra at the time. It's a little too pat, Rollins. Besides, that curler could very easily have dropped out of your pocket.
But why should I shoot at Lucille?
For the best reason in the books, you wanted to kill her. And when that yacht business almost boomeranged on you, you still hadn't changed your mind. And that led to this whole routine with me double-billed as Patsy and star witness both.
Oh, you're out of your mind, Marlowe. I couldn't have set that explosion on the yacht as a trap for Lucille.
Why not?
Because it was on account of me that Lucille wasn't on the yacht herself that night.
What?
After we argued, we decided not to spend any more time under the same roof. Lucille said that suited her fine and she'd sleep on the yacht. And we let it go at that till about noon on Friday.
Then you got small about things and said the yacht was yours, maybe? That you'd sleep on it?
Yes. I was just bickering.
Just
I know.
a minute, Rollins. I've heard enough, and I think I finally understand this whole screwy deal. I'll know for sure just as soon as I can make one single phone call to your house. We'll get back to Slater. Come on. When I got to a telephone and through to the maid at the Rollins place, I was almost positive that in another minute I'd have both a solid answer for my client and a couple of clumsy customers for the law. But when the shaky voice at the other end of the tube told me that Lucille had just left the house in high gear, after mumbling something about a place called Inspiration Point, I stopped being confident and started to worry. And when I tossed the jackpot question at the maid and got the winning answer, that worry became something worse, and it must have showed.
What is it, Marlowe? What did you find out?
Too much to explain now. Where's Inspiration Point, Rollins?
About a mile south of here, straight along the shore.
Good. What kind of a car does your wife drive?
A blue Nash. What's Inspiration Point got to do with Lucille, Marlowe?
Everything. Now, look. You call the cops and tell them to get out there as fast as they can. Do you get me? As fast as they can. Inspiration Point turned out to be an acre of wind-swept rock that overlooked the cold January sea. And after I saw Lucille's empty car, I crept, staggered, and fell down the narrow, winding trail that led from the road to the promontory itself. I was afraid that I was going to be too late to stop what I was sure was a hastily scheduled murder. But a minute later, when I rounded the last crazy turn in the trail, I felt better. Because standing only a couple of yards away from me, her hair slapping wildly against the upturned collar of her coat, and very much alive, was Lucille Rollins. I was about to breathe a sigh of relief when suddenly I caught the expression in her eyes. I turned to follow the line of her unblinking gaze, and I knew that I hadn't arrived any too soon. Because the lady was being held at the point of a gun held by Arthur Slater. I closed my hand tight around the cold .38 in my pocket and moved closer.
When you called me at the house, you said that my husband was alive and with you. Why did you lie to me?
Because I knew that would bring you running. And I had to be alone with you, Lucille, so I could do what I missed doing last time.
Last time? You mean the yacht? You did that?
Yes. But somehow or other, Ben was out there instead of you. So that accident was a waste of time. But this one, the bereaved wife who jumped or fell to her death from the edge of Inspiration Point, won't be.
But why, Slater? Why do you want to kill me?
There's no time to explain, Lucille.
And we'll take time, Slater.
Marlowe, you!
Yeah, me!
Don't you!
Marlowe! Marlowe, he's going to kill me.
Yes, honey, I know. He had to.
But why, Marlowe? Why?
Because he stole your husband's invention to sell to Walter Pittman. He was going to go into business with him. But now when the cops get here, he's going first to a hospital and then to jail. A grand larceny and attempted murder.
Attempted murder? What about Ben, Marlowe?
Ben was a near miss, honey, nothing more. You'll see what I mean in a minute. When Lucille found out that Ben was still alive, there were a lot of tears and promises to be good from both parties. And it wasn't until an hour had gone by and the police had already booked both Slater and Pittman, who was picked up heading back for L.A., that Mr. and Mrs. Rollins were in any condition to sit down and talk things over, even with the help of coffee and cigarettes in the Rollins home.
Then the whole scheme, Marlowe, was designed by Slater, who, as my business manager, had access to the new curlers.
That's right. Knowing how Walter Pittman felt about you, Slater secretly contacted him to handle the manufacturing end, you see?
Yes, I see.
Well, a few changes in the design, and the whole thing would have been patented and on the market while you and Slater...
Pretended that Pittman was a stranger to him.
Were still laboring away at last-minute changes.
And when we learned about Pittman's product, Slater would act as surprised as Ben here.
You're so right, Lucille. That was the plan. Oh, but it fell apart. See, it fell apart when you accidentally ran into Slater in that small bar in downtown L.A., do you remember?
Yes.
When he was with Pittman, the man you described to me as the stranger?
Yes, of course.
All right. Well, he realized then that with Pittman's product a success, you would sooner or later see a picture of Pittman, the newly rich inventor, and recognize him as the man you saw with Slater before Pittman's product was on the market.
So that meant that Slater either had to get rid of Lucy or give up his entire plan. Have you got a match, Mr. No, I'm going to give them up. But Marlowe, was Pittman involved in the murder attempt, too?
Oh, no. He drew the line at the theft. See, when he found out that you had died mysteriously, he turned up here to check on Slater because he couldn't afford to be mixed up in your murder.
I see. But how did you figure all this, Marlowe?
Well, after I had tangled with everybody, I was no place. Angie Gordon was looking for an angle. You, Lucille, were getting shot at, poor darling. Yeah, and Pittman and Slater were not on the same team. At least as far as the business on the yacht was concerned. Nobody seemed to have a clear-cut motive.
But when I told you that Lucille herself was supposed to stay on the yacht that night, you had the answer.
That was the time. After I called your house and asked the maid the jackpot question, which was, who aside from you, Ben, knew that Lucille was going to sleep on the yacht Friday night?
And she said Slater, didn't she?
Yeah. Said something else, too. She also said that you had left for Inspiration Point in a big hurry.
Yes. Then Slater tried to kill me first on the yacht, second in the house here, and finally out on the point.
Mm-hmm. But in the end, it worked out fine, darling. Because the third time was the charm. For us. Well, by the time I was through tying in all the loose ends for my client and his wife, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was dog-tired all over again. When I got into my car and started away from the place, Ben and Lucille were standing in the doorway waving at me and smiling. So as I drove back toward L.A., I forgot about the sleep I was missing and thought about them. A couple who couldn't get along until one or the other of them had been robbed, dynamited, and shot at. I guess it's really so. As the old bromide has it, the path of true love never does run smooth. Smoothly. It's smooth. Oh, well.
The Adventures of Philip Marlowe, created by Raymond Chandler, stars Gerald Moore and is produced and directed by Norman MacDonald. Script is by Mel Donnelly, Robert Mitchell, and Gene Levitt. Featured in the cast were Lorette Philbrandt, Edgar Barrier, Virginia Gregg, John Daner, and Jack Moyles. The special music was by Richard Arunt. Be sure and be with us again next week when Philip Marlowe says...
Somewhere in the cold, persistent rain that made the city itself seem a thing of evil, a girl had disappeared, and it was my job to find her. But before I did, I found death and a devil.
The Jack Benny Show's on CBS Sundays at 7 Eastern Standard Time, and comes right in the middle of 90 minutes of wonderful comedy on CBS's new early Sunday evening lineup. Immediately preceding Jack's show, you'll find Spike Jones and his Spotlight Review at 6:30 Eastern Time. And following the Benny Show, Amos and Andy take over with their inspired humor. Listen to Spike Jones and Amos and Andy over most of these same CBS stations tomorrow, flanking Jack Benny. They add up to 90 solid minutes of merry Sunday listening on CBS. Now, stay tuned for Gangbusters, which follows immediately over most of these stations. This is Roy Rowan speaking for CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.